I never thought that the gift for my 70th birthday would be a windowless room and a betrayal wrapped in smiles. "Happy birthday, Mom," Laura said, placing my suitcase at the entrance of the nursing home. Her voice was sweet, the kind of sweetness that makes you nauseous, the kind that turns your stomach. Her husband, Ben, that well-dressed parasite, gave a smug smile from the car. They thought they'd buried me alive, but when I walked into the director's office, something shifted. He was young, suited, with the dull look of someone who pushes paper all day, and yet he jumped to his feet the moment he saw me, like he'd seen a ghost, or more accurately, a name on a gravestone, but not mine. "You're Margaret Ellis?" he asked, swallowing hard. I didn't answer, just nodded and extended my hand. I shook his with purpose, because yes, I still have strength, more than they ever imagined. That moment, that look between us was my silent salvation. The director knew something my children didn't. I wasn't some helpless old woman. I was the co-founder of the trust fund that financed, among other things, that very facility, the same place they thought they were locking me away in. Did they really think I'd just sit there quietly? That after decades of building hospitals, universities, even shelters, I'd let myself be shoved into a corner like some worn-out antique? I walked out of his office slowly, yes, but not out of weakness. I was counting the steps of my plan. A plan that didn't begin that morning, but months ago, when Laura started helping with my banking, and Ben kept whining about how tough things were at his company. And I, the star of my own carefully written play, just nodded, smiled, let them feel clever, let them believe they were so sly. I even made them tea. But that morning, as they left me safely, tucked away in a place I helped build with my own 2 hands, I knew the time had come. This wasn't about pride anymore. This was about justice, not just for me, but for every woman like me who raised her children with love, only to become nothing more than a scribble on some forged power of attorney. I glanced back one last time from the hallway. I saw Ben's car pull away, Laura barely turning her head to glance at the rearview mirror. Not a tear, not even an "I love you." And that was perfect, because from now on, every step I take will be cold, calculated, and final. The next time my daughter says my name, it'll be in a courtroom. And it won't be to wish me a happy birthday. They assigned me a room that smelled like disinfectant and resignation. The walls were painted a bland, soulless beige, like they were trying to erase any trace of personality. On one side, a pathetic excuse for a window, looking straight into a concrete wall. The bed was as hard as the truth I'd just swallowed. And on the nightstand, an old Bible, as if that was enough to soothe the women the world had chosen to forget. While a nurse explained the mealtimes and medication schedule as if I were an inmate, not a guest, my mind drifted, back to the home Richard and I built together, to his laughter as he laid the final brick on the porch, to our nights over coffee, dreaming up ways to give back to a world that had given us so much. And now, here I was, reduced to a checklist of basic needs. Me, a woman who once coordinated the layout of entire hospitals, now had to ask permission just to step outside into the garden. But the worst part wasn't the room. It was what Laura didn't pack in my suitcase. Not a single photo of Richard. Not the locket he gave me the day we signed the charter for our foundation. Not the scrapbook where I kept every newspaper clipping about the work we did. But they remembered to pack my pills. Oh yes, those were labeled and organized, of course. So the official version of the story could remain that I was being taken care of. Taken care of. That's what the brochure said. But I knew the signs of abandonment dressed up as concern. I'd seen them in every retirement facility I'd ever toured as a benefactor. The blank stares, the burned-out staff, the activity calendars that hadn't been updated in weeks. This wasn't care. It was isolation, a storage facility for elderly women with pensions, waiting for death. Sitting on that unfamiliar bed, I mentally revisited every "just this once" bank transfer Laura had begged for, every meeting where Ben just wanted to better understand my finances. And suddenly it all fit together, the rush to revise my will. The visits that came with hugs in one hand, and legal forms tucked under the other. The documents I'd signed, trusting their words more than I should have. Right then, curled up in a cold metal chair, the truth hit me. They hadn't placed me here out of love. They were removing me, quietly, the way you tuck a broken heirloom into a drawer and forget it was ever yours. But they made one mistake. They left me alone, yes, but with my mind intact, with every memory sharpened like a scalpel. And even though they took my pictures, my locket, my home, they forgot the most dangerous thing I still had. My name, Margaret Ellis. I went through the contents of the suitcase with the same precision engineering had taught me. Every item was a clue, every absence a sign. Old clothes, worn out. Nothing that actually represented me. Not a single one of my favorite blouses. None of the wool sweaters I used to wear at foundation meetings, pants from a decade ago. And every pair of shoes, rubber-soled, as if I was no longer worthy of leather. But that wasn't the worst of it. The wooden jewelry box Richard gave me, empty. That's where I kept my anniversary rings, the necklace with our foundation seal, and the key to the drawer that held our most important documents. The deed to the house, the legal powers, the original foundation agreements. All of it, gone. I sat down on the bed, hands folded in my lap, feeling my fingers start to tense. Richard always said my hands were like maps, strong, calloused, full of history. And now those same hands trembled with fury. This wasn't forgetfulness. This was a plan. A calculated plan, executed with surgical precision, like a controlled demolition. They left just enough to make it look like a simple oversight, but not so much that I wouldn't notice what was missing. The recent visits from Laura and Ben began to take on a new light. Their little helping moments, cleaning out my study. The times they offered to organize my papers while I brewed the tea. The afternoons they volunteered to go to the bank in my place because I shouldn't have to worry about those things anymore. And I, foolishly grateful, let them. It's what children do, Margaret, I told myself. It's normal for them to take care of you. Now I see it clearly. What they did wasn't help. It was extraction, little by little. First my routine, then my possessions, then my money, and finally my place in the world. And they did it all, smiling. But do you know what hurt the most? It wasn't losing the locket. It wasn't even the missing deed to my house. It was opening the toiletry kit and realizing my perfume was gone. The one Richard bought me in Paris for our 30th anniversary, the only one I ever wore on meaningful occasions. That meant, to Laura, I had no more meaningful occasions ahead. But I decided otherwise. That day, in that borrowed room, with no photos, no familiar scent, no trace of me, would be my new anniversary. The day construction began. Not of buildings, not of foundations, but of my revenge. I spent the first few days observing, not like a nosy old woman, like an engineer, standing in front of a botched construction job. The place was called the Grand View. Ironic, really. There was nothing grand, and certainly no view, just gray walls and silent hallways. The staff moved with a lifeless shuffle of people who stopped caring a long time ago. Recreational activities were rare, and the smiles? Forced. This wasn't a home. It was a warehouse for bodies. On the surface, everything looked fine. Clean beds, meals on time, nurses in pristine uniforms. But I knew how to spot invisible cracks. That kind of training doesn't fade with age. One resident, Clara, whispered to me that there used to be painting classes and music in the afternoons. Now it was just low-volume television and naps forced by unnecessary medication. She said it so quietly, like even the air might punish her for speaking up. The shifts were disorganized. The air conditioning failed in some rooms. And the director, the same one who'd turned pale the day I arrived, rarely showed his face and spoke even less. But that wasn't the most troubling part. One morning, on my way to the dining room, I passed the visitation lounge. An elderly woman was sitting there, crying quietly. Her daughter had canceled on her for the third time that week. The social worker didn't comfort her. She offered her a sedative, That's when it hit me. This wasn't just a place where bodies were forgotten. This was where souls went to be discarded. And this was the model Laura and Ben had picked for me. Zero emotional investment, just enough care to keep up appearances. And maybe, one day, enough grounds to legally claim I was no longer capable of making my own decisions. But here's what they didn't know. This crumbling structure had a fatal flaw. I was one of the original founders of the trust that financed this place. They did everything they could to erase me, but my name was carved into the foundation, like blueprints hidden behind drywall, just waiting for the right architect to bring them back to life. That afternoon, I sat alone in the tiny garden behind the facility, a sad patch of grass where a single bougainvillea clung to life. But I saw more than weeds. I closed my eyes and heard Richard's voice. "It's the foundation, Maggie. The important part is what no one sees. But it holds everything up." He was right. They thought they'd reduced me to rubble. But I was just inspecting the damage. And I'd already found the first crack. On the third day, I asked to speak with the head nurse. I told her I'd forgotten a very important document, my personal medication log, which I always carried with me. I explained I needed to double-check that they were using the correct dosage. "I have a history of intolerance to metoprolol." I lied gently, like someone who can barely recall her own last name. She hesitated, of course, but when she saw my squinting eyes and trembling voice, she decided I was just another paranoid elderly woman. "It might be in your intake file, Mrs. Ellis," she said, glancing at her computer. She walked me to the administrative office, where a young assistant began searching for my physical file. I feigned mild interest until I saw it, a folder with my full name and a signed document inside. Stop. That signature wasn't mine. It looked close, but it wasn't. I knew it instantly. How could I not? I've signed thousands of blueprints, contracts, legal agreements. The stroke was clumsy, hesitant, like someone trying to copy my signature from memory. No clean curve at the end, no slight tilt to the left, the one my grandson Ethan always called Grandma's signature style. I asked to see the page more closely. The assistant hesitated but handed it over. I smiled at him like a child asking for candy. And there it was, a legal power of attorney form, dated 3 weeks earlier. It claimed I had handed over my rights, financial and medical, to my daughter. Forged. Completely. I knew it. I confirmed it. And I photographed it silently with the cell phone they still let me keep, under the harmless excuse that it's good for her to talk to her grandson. The assistant turned away for a moment, flipping through another file, and I, with hands steady as ever, took the proof. Click, click, click. Sweat trickled down my back, but my face stayed blank. That file, that clumsy little fraud, was the start of my freedom. "Oh, I think I remember now," I lied sweetly. "The doctor said they'd explain it to me later." Silly me. I smiled. I stood up with my slow, careful walk, like someone grateful for a small favor. I left that office like nothing had happened. But inside, the alarm was deafening, ringing like war bells. The first lock had been cracked open. Now the only question was, how far were they willing to go to silence me? Spoiler, they wouldn't succeed. The phone rang mid-afternoon. It was Ben. His name appeared on the screen with that familiar passive-aggressive polish. "Just wanted to check in, Margaret. See how you're doing." I answered with a slow, muddled tone, like even remembering his name took effort. "Oh, Ben, I'm fine, I suppose. Still a bit disoriented. Everything's just so new." Of course. What matters is that you're safe," he said, his voice dripping with that oily charm he used whenever he was pitching one of his great ideas for everyone. Safe, what a conveniently loaded word. He rambled on about the nursing home menu, how attentive everyone had been when they dropped me off, and how Laura was just overwhelmed, only because she cares so much about you. I let him talk. I let him build his little stage performance of the concerned son-in-law, and just when he thought he had control of the conversation, I slipped in the question. "Ben, Do you know if they ever got around to fixing that issue with the electrical panel back at the house? The one where the power would cut whenever the oven and dishwasher were running at the same time? Silence. 3 seconds. 4. 5. I'm sorry, he replied, unsure. Yeah, I think so. Laura took care of that. She called a technician. A certified one? Because that panel had a faulty 220 line. If it's not inspected properly, it could cause a fire. Do you know what kind of wiring they used? Another silence. This one longer, thicker. Ben didn't know, because there was no technician. Because there was never any real plan to fix anything. Because the house wasn't their concern. Selling it was. And quickly. His tone shifted. Margaret, I don't think you need to be worrying about these things right now. What matters is your health, your peace of mind. Your health, your peace of mind. Not my dignity. Not my autonomy. Not my home. His once confident voice had gone tight around the edges. Anyway, he added quickly, if you need anything, just let us know, okay? Of course, Ben, I replied sweetly. It's always nice having someone nearby who understands electrical systems. Although, you didn't study that, did you? The hit landed clean. No need to raise my voice. He ended the call a few seconds later. And that's when I knew it had worked. Not because of what he said, but because of what he couldn't hide. Fear. Fear that I knew more than I let on. And I loved that. I didn't sleep that night. Not from anxiety, not from sadness. It was something else entirely. That sweet tension I used to feel just before closing a difficult project. That tightening in the chest that isn't fear. It's calculation. Precision. At exactly 6 a.m, while the rest of the facility stirred to the dull clatter of the breakfast cart, I picked up my phone and dialed my grandson's number. Grandma? Ethan answered groggily, his voice still thick with sleep, the voice that used to make me smile no matter what. But not this time. Hi, sweetheart, I said softly but firmly. I just wanted you to know I'm somewhere temporary, a facility, while they sort some things out. But don't worry, I'm okay. Silence. I could feel him sitting up straighter on the other end. What do you mean a facility? Since when? Mom said you were on vacation with some friends. Lies. Predictable ones. Just a few days now, I replied. You know how things go when adults believe decisions should be made for you, not to with you. I just wanted you to hear it from me, and I need a favor. Anything, Grandma, he said without hesitation. I need you to go to my house. I want you to check how everything looks. Don't tell anyone we spoke. Just let me know if anything feels off. If you see something that doesn't sit right, especially if there's someone there who shouldn't be. His answer was instant. I'll go today, right after class. That was my first real move. Not a plea, not a complaint, a quiet command, a seed. And he watered it better than I ever could have hoped. That afternoon, he called me from the garden at the home. His voice was shaking. Grandma, they're emptying the house. There are boxes everywhere. Some woman with glasses was taking photos. She said she was a real estate agent. When I asked, Mom told me you wanted to sell everything because you can't live alone anymore. I took a slow, deep breath. Not from shock, from confirmation. And what did you say to them? Nothing. I locked myself in my room and called you. But Grandma, what's going on? Why would they put you there and not tell me? Because you're not easy to manipulate, Ethan, I said plainly. Because you still have a memory, and because they can't buy your silence with a joint bank account or fake concern. Ethan was the final piece on my board. Because Laura and Ben had forgotten one simple truth. Grandchildren inherit too, not just property, but principles. And he inherited mine. You want the truth, Ethan? I asked, surprised at how calm my voice had become. They forged documents to get me in here. They're trying to sell my house, take my money, and they thought I wouldn't notice. Silence. The kind you could slice with a knife. Do you want to help me? Anything. Then don't confront them. Not yet. Be my eyes, my ears, and if you can, take photos. Of the listing. Of the boxes. Of everything. Are you planning something? "Ethan, sweetheart, I'm not planning. I've already started." When I hung up, a wave of calm spread over me. Not because I had an ally now, but because, for the first time in weeks, I had spoken to someone with no lies, no manipulation, no need to pretend I was weak. Because Ethan didn't see me as a burden. He saw me for what I am, his grandmother, a woman who doesn't just survive betrayal, she weaponizes it. That night, I slept like I hadn't since the day Laura left me at that place, with the certainty that demolition had begun, and every piece of falling rubble would land squarely, one by one, on them. 3 days later, Ethan called me again, this time from the front porch of my house. But it wasn't his voice that trembled now. It was the world around him. "Grandma, there's another showing today. More boxes. And Ben is sitting in the dining room, signing papers with some blonde woman." I stayed silent. "I saw the sign," he added. "Open house. Immediate move-in available." "God, Grandma, they haven't even finished packing your things." Still, I said nothing. I just closed my eyes and pressed my wedding ring between my fingers. "Do you want me to go inside?" Yes, but not as a grandson, as a witness. I heard the click of his phone camera again and again. Photos, videos, recordings. A young man, still full of fire, still clean in heart, doing what I couldn't do from behind these walls, gathering proof, reclaiming ground. And then something unexpected happened. Laura caught him. "Ethan!" Her voice cracked, furious. "What are you doing taking pictures?" He didn't flinch. "Selling my grandmother's house without her permission? Is that what we do now? Shove her into a facility and then treat her like excess furniture?" The sound of chairs scraping, raised voices, the realtor stammering apologies and retreating in a hurry. And then Laura's voice. "We did it for you, Ethan. For the family. For our business. We're about to lose everything." And just like that, the truth didn't come from me or my suspicions or my planning. It spilled straight from her mouth. Desperation is the most honest of emotions. "You don't understand," Laura screamed. "We're drowning in debt. The loan didn't go through. The company is bankrupt, and Mom has money just sitting there." Ethan recorded everything. He sent it to me. Raw, unedited, no explanation needed. Just the plain truth. That my daughter, the one I raised with books, warm meals, and unwavering respect, had used me like a lifeboat for a sinking business she barely understood. But it was Ben who sealed the scene, with that cold, corporate tone of his. "Look, Ethan, this is done. Legally, we have the power. If you ever want to inherit anything, you do well to stay out of it." The threat was clear, but they made a critical mistake. They assumed Ethan was like them, and they underestimated him. "I don't want an inheritance soaked in abuse," my grandson said. "I want the truth. And I want to make sure my grandmother isn't treated like a checkbook on legs." I listened to it all from a bench in the nursing home's garden. In front of me, a butterfly landed on a wilted flower. The irony wasn't lost on me. What they assumed was dead still had life. What they believed weak still had a voice. That same day, without wasting a second, I forwarded the audio to my personal attorney, the same one who helped me establish the trust over 20 years ago. I attached the photos, the forged documents, everything Ethan and I had gathered in secret. "Time, get ready, asterisk," I wrote. "This is going to escalate." And the foundation is already rotten. That night, the director of the home found me sitting in the lobby, motionless, staring at a white wall. "Everything all right, Mrs. Ellis?" I turned to him with a faint smile. "Perfect. Do you know what today is?" Tuesday? "No. It's the day your bosses find out the co-founder of the trust that funds this place is alive, alert, and furious." His face drained of color. He understood everything, without me saying another word. I was no longer the forgotten grandmother. I was Margaret Ellis, and I was taking back what's mine. Rage can be a dangerous engine if you don't know how to drive it. That's why I didn't run. I walked. I didn't scream. I made a call. And I didn't wish for justice. I organized it. That same night, with every piece of evidence Ethan had sent me, I dialed the number I hadn't used since Richard passed away. Alan Prescott, my personal lawyer, and co-founder of the Ellis Prescott Trust for Dignified Housing. "Margaret," he said, startled, "is that really you?" "I'm alive, Alan, but more importantly, I'm awake, and I need your help." He didn't ask questions. He scheduled me in for the very next morning. And thanks to a last name that still held weight in this town, the facility director approved a supervised outing, never suspecting I was about to launch a legal hurricane. At Alan's office, I handed it all over: the recordings, the photos, the forged power of attorney, and most importantly, Laura's confession. That line that burned like fire: "We did it for the business. We're bankrupt." Alan listened in silence, the way he always did when he knew I was ready to tear down a rotten structure. "This is worse than I imagined, Margaret. We're talking document forgery, elder financial abuse, and potentially real estate fraud. And I want you to use every bit of it," I said. "But not just to defend me. I want a full investigation, every cent, including the trust." He raised an eyebrow. "The trust? Why?" "Because the Grandview, the facility they dumped me in, is part of our investment network. And I want to know if this place, which was supposed to be a safe haven, has become a breeding ground for people who prey on women like me." That got his attention. Alan called Susan Dreyfus, the current president of the Trust's board. She knew me. She'd seen me oversee construction zones and disaster areas with the same fire I was speaking with now. "Susan," I said, skipping any pleasantries, "I'm at the Grandview, but not as a benefactor, as a hostage." Silence. "What are you talking about?" "I'm saying my daughter forged documents to put me here while she emptied my house and listed it for sale. And she did it under the umbrella of an institution we built to protect the vulnerable, not silence them." Susan asked for proof. "We sent everything within 10 minutes. "I'll act," she said, voice trembling. "Not just for you. This might be the start of something deeply rotten." That night, as I returned to the home, something had changed. The staff looked at me differently, like people unsure whether the woman in front of them was a sweet old lady or a legal time bomb in orthopedic shoes. And then, a surprise. Mr. Fitzpatrick, the director, asked to speak with me in private. "Mrs. Ellis, I'd like to apologize. I didn't know. I had no idea who you were." "It's not about who time," I told him. "It's about how many others this has happened to while no one was watching." Fitzpatrick was sweating. His hands shook. "I'm willing to cooperate. I'll turn over the admission files. I'll show the security footage. Whatever you need." I nodded. "If you help, you're part of the solution. But if you try to protect the people who did this to me, you'll become one of them." I didn't sleep that night. Not out of fear, out of clarity. Because this was no longer just about me. It was about every woman shoved into a corner, stripped of her choices, and labeled the crazy old lady who spends too much. Margaret Ellis had started something bigger than a lawsuit. She was drawing up the blueprints for a new kind of structure, one where daughters don't warehouse their mothers to save their sinking businesses, one where older women don't lose their voice. They amplify it. And that structure? It already had a foundation. The next morning didn't bring light. It brought fire. Alan had called me at exactly 6 a.m. "The complaint is filed, Margaret. The prosecutor has all the documentation. We've also submitted a formal charge for elder financial abuse. And this afternoon, the judge will sign a protective order over your assets." I nodded silently, the way I used to when blueprints were laid out in front of me. No need to celebrate. The most important part was still ahead, the collapse. "And Laura?" "Ben?" Alan sighed. "They've been notified. Ben already reached out. Says it was all a misunderstanding. Laura hasn't said a word. Not yet." "They'll say plenty," I replied. "But this time, they'll say it to the law, not to a mother they thought they could bury." After that, I made my own call. "Ethan," I said to my grandson, "it's time." I explained everything, that my lawyers would summon them under the pretense of finalizing the sale of the house, that it would be a formal, private meeting, and I'd be there too. "What should I do, Grandma?" "Just be present, and don't say a word. I want them to see your face when the ground gives out beneath them. I want them to feel that they didn't just lose me, they lost you too. That same day, I called Mr. Fitzpatrick, the facility director. I need the visiting room for a legal meeting. Closed doors. And I want the staff to know. The staff? Yes, because I want everyone here to understand that women like me don't get locked away without consequences. He swallowed hard. You'll have it, Mrs. Ellis. At exactly 4 o'clock, they arrived. Ben in a cheap suit with that fake salesman grin. Laura in a dress clearly meant to disguise her nerves. Mom, she began, putting on her sugary voice, it's so good to see you. Are you okay? Perfect, I said, unmoved from the head of the table. And you? How's the real estate market treating you? Silence. Heavy and sharp. Ben cleared his throat. We're just here to finalize some paperwork, right? About the house? Yes, of course. Alan, my lawyer, interjected. But first, there's something you need to see. He slid a manila envelope onto the table. From it, he pulled the evidence. The forged signature. The audio of Laura shouting that they were bankrupt. Ethan's photos. Everything. Ben tried to push back. This doesn't prove anything. On the contrary, Alan cut in. It proves everything, and that's why you're here. At that moment, the door opened. 2 agents walked in. Badges. Authority. Purpose. Laura stood up so fast her chair nearly fell. This is a trap. No, I said. This is an audit of your soul. The officers handed over the court order. Asset freeze. Formal investigation for fraud. Ben's face drained from pink to ash. And then, the voice that shook me to my core. I'm sorry, Grandma. It was Ethan. He walked over, gently placed his hand on my shoulder. I'm with you. They don't speak for me. Laura tried to rush toward me, now crying. Mom, please. We didn't mean to hurt you. No, I said, locking eyes with her. Then why did it feel like I was being buried alive? The police escorted them out. No handcuffs, not yet, but the weight of public shame was already draped over their shoulders. As they disappeared, Mr. Fitzpatrick stepped forward, watching from the doorway. Mrs. Ellis, what now? I stood up slowly, with the same poise I used to carry when pitching development proposals to government panels. Now, we build something better. Because the most beautiful thing about buildings is this. When they collapse due to human failure, you can always draw up new plans. Stronger ones. Fairer ones. And this time, no one will take the blueprints out of my hands. The visiting room had emptied out, but the air was still thick, heavy with tension. Ethan stayed beside me, steady. Alan gathered the documents. The officer stepped out with signed orders in hand. But we weren't done. That was just the first crack. And once a structure has a fissure, collapse is inevitable. Minutes later, the lead detective on the case arrived, at my request. Tall, serious, voice like dry stone. He asked to speak in front of everyone, including the director of the facility, and a few staff who couldn't hide their curiosity. Mrs. Ellis, he said, nodding slightly, the official search of Mr. Benjamin Foster's residence and business has concluded, and the findings are conclusive. I crossed my arms. Laura stood in a corner, arms wrapped around herself. Ben wouldn't even lift his head. Foster and Langley has been bankrupt for 6 months, the detective continued. They've been falsifying financial records to lure investors. The sale of your home, Mrs. Ellis, was their last-ditch effort to secure liquidity. If the property didn't sell by the end of the month, they lost everything. I turned to look at Ben. His jaw quivered. He didn't even have the decency to pretend he still had pride. Additionally, the detective said, the power of attorney document used to place you in this facility. We had it analyzed. Preliminary handwriting analysis indicates clear forgery. And most importantly, we have recorded testimony from Ethan Foster, who described in detail the actions, statements, and behavior of his parents. A wave of murmurs passed through the staff. Laura looked at me again, this time pleading. Mom, we just wanted to save something. We were desperate. Save what? I asked, steady. A lie? A life you built on my savings, my house, my name? She said nothing. Then I turned to the detective. May I add one last statement? He nodded, surprised. I rose slowly. Not from weakness, from intention. I walked to the center of the room, looked at Director Fitzpatrick, then to the rest. For weeks, they made me believe I was irrelevant, that my story, my legacy, could be locked away behind these walls. But they forgot something. I paused. This place, the Grand View, the same place they locked me in, was built with funding from the Ellis Prescott Foundation, a trust I co-founded with my husband Richard over 30 years ago. And to this day, I still sit on its governing board. The reaction was immediate. Fitzpatrick took a step back. A nurse covered her mouth. Laura froze. Ben mumbled something too low to repeat. "Do you understand now?" I asked calmly, never raising my voice. They erased me with lies inside a building that still carries my name in its blueprints. I returned to my seat. No one moved. "They tried to disappear me," I said, closing. "But they forgot the truth about foundations. They always remember who they belong to." The detective spoke again, his tone now layered with respect. "Thank you, Mrs. Ellis. We'll proceed with formal charges. This isn't over, but we're finally on the right path." Ethan leaned down and squeezed my hand. And I thought only this. My voice didn't tremble. I didn't seek revenge through rage or screams. I did it through documents, through facts, through memory. And it's not over. Because this wasn't the final scene. This was the controlled demolition, and I could already hear the structure beginning to crack. The morning of their arrest, I didn't open my eyes like someone waking up. I opened them like someone giving the signal to bring down an entire structure. I didn't have to lift another finger. I'd done my part. The fall was already in motion. At exactly 7:43 a.m., Alan called me. His voice was firm, almost ceremonial. "Margaret, it's done. The operation was a success. Laura and Ben are in custody. Media crews, neighbors, even local news drones overhead. The golden couple of family business, caught on camera, walking down their front steps, hands cuffed. Ah, justice. Not screamed, not begged for, executed. By mid-morning, the news had spread everywhere. Arrested for fraud and elder abuse. Tried to steal the home of a widowed mother. Grandson delivered key evidence. Each headline cut deeper into their perfect image. Each article, a public demolition. I didn't cheer. I didn't cry. I just opened the newspaper the way I used to review a final report at the end of a project. Thorough, detached, knowing it was done right. That night, in my room at the facility, a space that now smelled more like justice than captivity, I turned on the lamp and poured myself a glass of wine. Because even a demolition deserves a toast. To you, Ben and Laura, I drank to you. Not for who you were, but for what you will never be again. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and let me know which city you're watching from. I'd love to see how far this story travels. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and check out my other videos.